Hey guys, it's Mike just breaking in the beginning of this episode just for a little bit of an introduction. This episode was very important for me. Starting this project a few years ago, not ever did I imagine I'd be talking to some of the composers I've been talking to. The caliber of composers we've had on this show has already been astounding, and I'm so thankful to each of them for allowing us to get inside their brains and kind of root around a little bit about the process. You know, Frank Klepacki from the Dune series and Command and Conquer, to Mike Capitan with Siberia a few weeks ago. It's just been a blast to grow up with these soundtracks and these composers and to be able to talk to them. Today's episode definitely it marks a key moment for the show, and to be able to talk to a man like Matt Uelmen, who has really, with his first two Diablo soundtracks, really captured a type of songwriting that has become pretty common now and something that's influenced a lot of people. He's a wonderful guy to talk to. This interview is a little bit more just us listening to Matt and listening to the way he describes things from his childhood to his inspirations, his work on video games, Diablo and beyond. It was just fascinating to listen to, and you're going to get questions from us, but we are, for the most part, just taking it in, and it's a wonderful couple hours we spent with Matt, and I really hope you all enjoy it. I am so thankful once again to Matt for stopping by and allowing two people who, you know, we're just a small little podcast out in the vast ocean of podcasts out there. And he gave us time out of his day. I couldn't be more thankful. And again, it was such a pleasure to talk to him. Reaching out to him was a bit of a surreal experience, and having the ability to talk to someone as proficient and as musically gifted as Matt Uelmen has been just a real blast for me. Our conversations leading up to this interview and beyond have been extremely fun and frequent, which is something I never thought I'd be able to say. But here is the interview with Matt Uelmen, writer, composer, and, dare I say, friend. You've tuned in to chipsgrooveradio with Mike and Jesse.
In terms of finding latitude, because I think they actually have some really creative, interesting stuff going on besides just being a component of the AI money hose. But that's kind of what I did, and I was really, really fortunate in that someone that knew my music and had worked with them and still does work with them noticed that I was part of the announced layoffs of Take-Two/Zynga in late June, and pretty much had perfect timing in terms of a cold email.
Oh, wow.
Just a few days into that, and so it worked out really well.
That's fantastic
Awesome.
news. Congratulations, Mike.
Yeah,
Because
congratulations.
I really, as I've told a bunch of different people, I really like being an employee, and unlike a lot of people want to interface with musicians as contractors, but I've never been a contractor.
Mm-hmm.
I really am happy to hopefully have another big chunk of my career without having to be that, just because I'm not a businessman. I like being a musician. I like being, putting on a designer hat and thinking about a product, like as a full kind of teammate delivering something. And I don't like the idea of spending like 60% of my time hustling for gigs and, figuring out tax games, which you kind of end up having to do when you're a contractor.
Yeah.
But I understand it. That may or may not be true, but I like the idea of just having my blinders on and writing music, as I've been lucky enough to mostly do the past 30 years. So I'm super happy about that. And also, like, this team has a lot of upside in terms of they've already they've already been banging away for like 6+ years at the challenge of putting, like, basically making Chat GPT. So they've used a bunch of different engines.
Oh, wow.
Using an AI engine to be like a DM. And like, that's pretty cool. Like, I mean, one thing that, like, in all of the Dungeons and Dragons-y type things that I've worked on, one thing that the experience has never had is like a like genuinely imaginative, sometimes slightly perverse and sadistic DM kind of gives the D&D experience in terms of, like, just that element of imagination. So having that kind of thing and having that kind of dynamism from a DM type role coming from AI is actually pretty neat.
Yeah.
I also really like the kind of moral and ethical aspect of presenting interfacing with a GPT type environment as an entertainment product. I really kind of like, there's a lot of news stories about people making it into their psychotherapist, their girlfriend, boyfriend, their physician, their ideological leader. And, like, that's all really scary and dangerous. And, like, interfacing with it as a defined entertainment product, I think, is actually, like, kind of the future and kind of like a good model for how humans should be interfacing with the technology. So I'm very happy about that part of it as well.
Absolutely. And that's wonderful to hear that you are coming into another job, and it sounds like something you're very excited for. So I wish you the best of luck there. Absolutely.
It's a great team. I mean, it's nice in that I get to be Mr. Showbiz in terms of it's a text-based medium that they're developing for the most part, and I get to kind of be the person to help them make it a little bit more entertainment-y in terms of, like, just the power of music. And just kind of having that role, being able to kind of craft the kind of Pavlovian elements of, like, sound part of the UI. That's really, really cool. It's great having all the real estate to myself too, in terms of creating that experience. There's a lot of elements of the gig that are very exciting in that way that I'm very happy about.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to thank you for coming on the podcast with us. Jesse and I were big fans, and we're beyond excited to be doing this, just to have the opportunity to talk to you, get inside your head for a little bit.
Yeah. Well, that can be a pretty nutty, scary place. I don't necessarily like visiting it or hanging out in there too long, but you guys are welcome to explore it.
We'll just take the Disney River cruise through it today, and
it's a small world. A lot of the old school Disney rides are basically river cruises. Yeah,
that's true.
I have a memory actually of, because I grew up in LA. I had, like, somewhat annual Disneyland experiences, and I have a memory of when I was, like, maybe 9 or 10 of one of the more rambunctious bad kids taking their big goofy plastic Dodger batting practice kind of like souvenirs cap and scooping it into the water. It's a small world, and I think getting kicked out of the park on that basis. So
really,
credit to do any of, like, using the plastic Dodger souvenir batting practice caps to scoop the water on the river.
No vandalism.
And get kicked out. Yeah, it was really vandalism or just kind of over enthusiasm and unapproved engagement with the water. I don't know if It's a Small World or Pirates of the Caribbean you did that on. It could have been either. They're both I think they're both still somewhat similar. They're both very similar. They're 40 years ago. Aging myself up.
Well, as you may or may not have remembered, the goal of this podcast is mainly, to honor composers throughout gaming history. I started it with the intent to make sure everyone had a highlight. I felt like music took a backseat, when people were talking about games. Music was rarely something they brought up. It's definitely getting more attention now, and I'm very happy for that. And, that's where this podcast started. So you being one of the major composers in my life, this is quite an exciting day for me.
That's very flattering. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So again, welcome to Chip Grooves Radio. I'm the host, Mike, and with me, as always, my good friend, Jesse. We are talking to none other than Matt Uelmen, famed composer of the Diablo 1 and 2 soundtracks, Torchlight, Hob, and more. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes.
Not much more. I have a kind of short, I'm known for, I guess BioShock has been out there current iteration since 2014. So, long development cycles are kind of common now.
Mm-hmm.
It's when I look back at like the early 60s composers, like if you actually look at like Morricone's IMDb page,
yeah,
notice he banged out like 4 movies a year in his glory years from like the 50s through the 60s. So it's kind of funny when I look back, I have like 7 or 8 titles and releases I'm super proud of, but that was like a 2-year stretch for Ennio, right? So
yeah, right.
It's funny how like long and deliberate, that's sort of the corner of games that I've been lucky enough to be in is the big self-indulgent AAA-ish, big release world. But it's kind of funny how short that list is for the 30 years or so I've been hacking away at it. It's notable.
Would you say it's gotten longer, the production time for the projects you've been working on? Would you say each one's a little bit longer kind of as time has progressed, just given the nature of the way gaming is now?
Well, I think these things are somewhat idiosyncratic in that obviously like with the success of the first 2 Diablos and with the success of the commercial success of WoW when I was working on it,
mm-hmm.
It's definitely gotten longer, but in a lot of ways, it's sort of there's a long-term trend that's kind of been more so every year, where when I first entered the industry, like a patch was really a patch, and having to have a big patch was almost kind of like a badge of shame in like the very kind of Japanese cultural space world that mid-90s gaming was. Like the fact if you needed a patch at all in like 1994 and 1995, that was kind of considered like you made some kind of substantive goof that needed to be addressed. And as time has gone on, like I almost feel like Diablo 2 was kind of one of the first games where a patch was seen as a content drop, and kind of like it had evolved such, in my first like 7 or 8 years in the industry, moving on from being a negative, pejorative thing to kind of just being an expected kind of content thing for a big title. And I think that's kind of overlaid with the subscription world that the WoW kind of helped create, in terms of everybody in the entertainment industry being super jealous of just how crazy profitable that subscription model was for WoW 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of like entertainment is transmogrified into everybody kind of chasing a subscription model at every level. And so the whole kind of, what a release is doesn't mean quite as much. But, when I first engaged with video games, it was, the 2 business models that I would have engaged with were, one, you either bought a cartridge. And cartridges, when you look back at the value of the dollar in the mid-'80s, what they are now, were so expensive. They were like the $230 or $240 in contemporary money, or even more.
Right.
And or you paid your quarter for your jollies at the arcade, and you only had an expectation of really 2 or 3 minutes out of entertainment out of that, unless like you were, like in my like 12-year-old peak gamerdom, I was able to play like 10-yard fight, the old football game, for like 20 or 25 minutes because I really knew what I was doing on that particular game. Or I could probably play like Karate Champ for like 10 minutes. And so you had to really you had to almost have like a hacker, level of skill to get more than your 2 or 3 minutes out of that entertainment. And that actually was, 25 cents in 1985. That's like $2 now, right? So
right.
It's a very, very different business model. A lot of that is just the way that I think digital technology became a kind of free-ish thing, where you were really paying with your attention and really paying with your sort of knowingly. I hear some noise.
Oops. Oh, did that actually play through the phone? That's funny.
That did play through the phone.
Vibes in the background for me to listen to. Apparently, it plays right through the phone, so I won't be doing that. That's funny.
I was getting some kind of alarm-ish sounds before, but to the total experience, so it's fun. Yeah, so the business model is definitely changed and evolved. And I was really only able to sneak into the industry in part, or it was made much easier for me to sneak into the industry in part because I kind of snuck in at the very the last dead spot in the gaming industry in general, when the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis were both long in the tooth, and 3DO had kind of failed to capture market share because it was priced so absurdly high for the time. I think that was marketed like around $800 or so in like 1993, which was kind of a non-starter. So it didn't stop Trip Hawkins from going for another few years and keeping it alive for a bit, which is actually kind of the big, subtle, secret backstory of Blizzard North, is that we actually were a football game developer and a 3DO developer in terms of our real business foundation when we were making the original Diablo. But Trip managed to do that despite having an absolutely absurd price point. Which would be like over $2,000 now in terms of like $800 in like 1993.
Wow.
But yeah, the power of music is always there to. The power of music is always going to be something that shows up, all over the place. It shows up in my opinion, kind of horrible contexts in terms of it humanizes like a Trump rally with YMCA. It shows up in a religious context. It shows up in an advertising context. It shows up in like an expectation of tunes you listen to when you're driving around. So I'm always like very respectful and kind of amazed at just how music finds a way to fit into the human experience in all sorts of crazy ways. And when it does show up, it's always very powerful in terms of it being something that breaks down barriers and something that takes a very intellectualized person and makes them emotional, and kind of the opposite. It could take a very emotional, manic person and you play them like a nice Bach fugue or Bach like 2 or 3 part invention, and all of a sudden they kind of know how like a physicist sees the world, right?
And that's the big part, is just
power of music is an amazing thing.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole thing. It's like a universal language that everyone can kind of rally against and just be moved by a piece of music, and that is so awesome to see. Maybe we can't get through to each other talking, but music might have that effect.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of like part of the as I look back on my life and my career, I don't always know 100% why I've done things and why I've done them the way I've done things. But in terms of like the fact that all of my large orchestral live recordings were in Bratislava, that was definitely part of not just the fact that like it's, the musicians there are significantly cheaper and much less of a hassle in terms of back end rights as in terms of doing it with like legit LA players or Nashville players, as some people do these days. But I like the idea of really bringing my work life into the middle of Central Europe, and also doing that work kind of in one of like the last big kind of infrastructure, cultural kind of jewel spaces that was created by communist Europe when it existed. It's kind of one of the last things that created that had kind of like the mojo of what old communist Europe was before it obviously collapsed under the weight of Metallica and Blue Jeans and McDonald's and Pizza Hut in 1992. So that's, in terms of just the power of music and all of the kind of public domain-ish stuff that had been recorded there. Like, I was very aware of that when I first went to Bratislava, that room, like, if you were a classical music fan and trying to study classical music in the mid 90s, and you didn't want to spend $14 on a CD, you wanted to spend like pretty much the bottom of the new CD price thing and get a public domain recording of like your Mahler or your Chopin or your Bach or whatever it is. There was a really good chance that if you were listening to an orchestral recording and it was an access recording, it was made in the same room that I did those sessions all 4 times. So for me, it was kind of a bridge not just to kind of the old communist Europe world, but a bridge to all those recordings that were made. Actually, they were mostly made right around the time after the wall fell, and a business person that owned Naxos had the entrepreneurial idea of, well, there's all these musicians that, are trained at a super high standard in a super professional room. Let's have them record the entire public domain kind of catalog, now that they're part of the West. And so, I was very aware of that. And just in terms of the universal power of music across societies and across history, that's definitely something that drew me there, and that I had kind of a strange relationship with in all 4 of my big sessions there.
Very cool. Very awesome. Sounds like a spiritual journey a little bit.
Yeah, my most recent, I'm descended from fairly old Americans on most of my sides, but my only grandparent not to be born in the U.S. Is my Sudeten German grandmother, who was born and came to the U.S. when she was just 2 or 3 years old in like 1921 or so, but she was born in what they called Brunn, but I think the Czechs call it Brno. It's the Czech part of the country, even though it's not far from Slovakia. And I was also very aware of that that's a 2 or 3 hour drive away from where she was born and where that side of the family was. And thankfully, they left when they did. It was not a good time, obviously, to be in that part of the world. Right. 20 years later. But it's definitely something that I've been aware of in terms of my most recent immigrant side is from that part of the world, and there is a kind of connection to that.
Absolutely. Well, we like to get a little bit of your backstory in terms of your childhood and when you started to get into music. What was that like? Well,
in getting this recent gig, I did a long-term interview with my new manager that talked about some of these things. And so it's actually pretty fresh in my mind from just doing that interview like a week and a half ago. I really grew up with both of my older sisters. Actually, the older of my 2 sisters, Nancy, is sort of a celebrity composer in her own world, which is very, very, very different from mine. Mm-hmm. In terms of genetics making someone who they are, Nancy is sort of another iteration of me. In terms of her career and in terms of her life. She and my other sister were getting weekly piano lessons from a great, great educator that's mentioned. I'm very happy that she's been mentioned in my Wikipedia bio as long as it's been up for a couple dozen years now. And that's Lene Bilski. She was giving us weekly lessons. And so as I was growing up, I was used to the sound of piano just filling the house. And I was kind of used to the expectation that that there was somebody playing piano most of the time or practicing piano most of the time. And that what a kid did was every week or so they would sit down and get their piano lesson in our living room. So for me, that kind of approach to the piano was just something that was always there. And I think that's I have no idea if I didn't have that, if I would have ended up as being a musician, nor do I know if I didn't not just have that, but if Lene Bilski didn't have the incredible patience of dealing with me from like age 8 through like 11 or 12, where I didn't really find it that interesting. It was more just kind of, was never really a chore, but she kept me in front of the piano and kept me on track in terms of like what a major and minor scale is and what an interval is and the ability to do basic reading. Just keeping me on track with that by being very, very patient with me in that kind of like mid-childhood period where I was a pretty mediocre piano student and kind of mediocre student in general, probably more into the video games in terms of like where my head really was between those two ages. And that just the way that set me up for when I was like 12 or 13. And I realized, oh, this Police and this Prince stuff that I really like, and that kind of makes me a cool kid in terms of being able to play it on the piano. There's like a whole world where I can sit, I can buy, the complete Police, which I destroyed the binding of because I love that book so much. Where I can sit down and like play tunes from all 5 albums and do my own bad version of piano of them. She actually, I don't know if I didn't have that level of patience from her, that I would have gotten to that point where puberty hit and I kind of like, was able to be there at that moment, for that to happen.
Absolutely.
So I was really, really lucky to grow up in a house where studying piano was just kind of in the air. And I was super duper lucky to have a teacher like Lene Bilski, that had that patience and that kept me on track when I was a mediocre at best student. And, a part of my identity too is I think she had a little bit of kind of the Polish mojo, despite her being born in this country and her family being here for a little while, in terms of kind of making me a weird 0% ethnic Slav, but very much kind of a strange honorary Slav that is sort of in that cultural space, along with going to Catholic school with the Croatian kids that were kind of the grandkids of the old Croatian fishermen that defined that community a century ago in, I'll use the pronunciation that locals use, which is San Pedro, as painful as that is for Hispano-Hablantes to hear. It is Pedro to people that live there. Even the kids that spoke Spanish at home, I think, called it Pedro amongst their friends. So it is San Pedro. So yeah, in terms of Lene Bilski and having that kind of Croatian world, I kind of absorbed this strange kind of Slavic element. Maybe it goes a little bit with my most recent immigrant grandparent being not ethnic Slav herself, but surrounded by Slavs where she was born in Sudeten, Germany. Sudeten, that sounds horrible. The Sudeten are part of, if you know the history, which unfortunately people never learn anything from, right? In terms of the kind of crust around Czechoslovakia that was Sudeten German in that era, which was kind of a ring around it in those times. Just to get off on a political sidetrack, which we probably shouldn't do.
No, you're all right. So when you said you were kind of a mediocre student and then things kind of picked up in puberty as you got a little bit older, what was it? Did you feel a switch, or was it just kind of gradual and you fell into it?
I think it's just, when you turn 12 or 13, you're kind of like, the way a kid is supposed to develop is you're kind of supposed to flower into what's hopefully like the best part of your adult self.
Mm-hmm.
For some of us, it can feel like the worst part of your adult self, and then that's kind of like where the classic juvenile delinquents kind of start to go bad and start to be able to get in trouble in a more adult-sized body. But yeah, it was kind of like just that feeling of like discovering one's real identity in terms of what I enjoyed and in terms of like something I've always kind of needed socially, which is to hide behind an instrument. In terms of like where I am, kind of my truest self is behind. I don't really even think of it as a mask. I kind of think that the person that I am, whether it's working all day next to a MIDI controller keyboard or me, playing keyboards in a college band or doing the restaurant gig I was lucky enough to have in college for a year or so. I kind of feel like that's the real me. I kind of feel like that's not, without a musical instrument in my hands, I kind of, it's like the best part of my personality, absolutely the best part of my economic function is missing. And so in that way, I'm kind of I feel like I am a true musician in that if you take that instrument out of my hands or away from my workspace, then, I'm really like I feel like a non-person.
A little bit lost.
Not, hopefully people, would say, oh, you still have value, blah, blah, blah. And I definitely feel I have value, as a parent, in my life. But even there, it's like my younger kid is an excellent musician, and my older kid is no slouch himself. He wrote an orchestral piece for his own high school graduation with zero background or training, just kind of dished out a little march where he actually wrote a full little orchestral chart for it, or like a band type chart for a little graduation march for himself. So if he was able to do that at age 17 or so, then obviously he's, not a total slacker in terms of his own musical talents.
That's awesome.
And yeah, my younger kid, I'm definitely, one thing I really like about this gig is coming up is there's a chance that I have to work not just in fantasy as a genre, but I may actually get to work in creating a little more kind of LA noirish, LA confidentialish, Chinatown-ish genre stuff, which means I can possibly exploit my younger kid with his tenor sax, which would be really, really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that would be, I'm kind of hoping that works out. I'm a big, my older kid was actually a monster noise in Torchlight 2. And I'm a big fan of exploiting child labor for building character. So nice. It's great when you find those opportunities and you can do that.
Absolutely. Now, when you
coal mine, get them dusty. Those little kids, they're built for the coal mine. When you're only 3 feet or so, you can get to a lot of coal that the adults can't get to, right?
That's true. So okay, so you've grown into music. You found yourself pursuing a musical career. What is it that brought you specifically to video games?
Well, the story there is that I had the idea of finding video game music as a possibility interesting when I was in college, just as kind of an idea that flashed in my mind a little bit, watching some guys play. I don't know if it was SNES or the old Nintendo. One of my really good friends had the old school original NES with Excite Bike and all those classics in that era. And I think they were playing SNES, and I think it was actually like a pretty mediocre game that was built on Desert Storm 1. They were playing, which is not a classic beloved game and kind of an offensive thing to license for a game, but I think it was kind of a Rack 1 SNES title they were playing. And I remember watching them. That would have been the right timing in 92 for such a title to exist. Mm-hmm. Kind of like a mediocre Eurofighter bomber type of thing in that war, based on, of course, George Bush giving Saddam the false green light and tricking him. But they were playing that game, and that's when the light bulb first went on. It sort of flickered and didn't really kind of become something I focused on until I'd been a unemployed bum with a fancy university college degree, making me feel like that much more of a loser for about 2 or 3 months. It might have been actually around this time of year, maybe a bit later, like late September 1993. And the economy in that year was really garbagey. A lot of the kind of recession had arrived from the kind of overhang of some of the ebullience of the economy in like 91 had all kind of cooled off. And that was actually like a really kind of crappy, tough recession to be starting your career in. And it was just, but I knew technology, I could kind of smell that technology was about to explode. And of course, Silicon Valley was about to explode like just a year or two later. I found, as I was doing like the local high school track, Prospect High School, where San Jose hits Saratoga, in the South Bay of California, the Bay being San Francisco Bay. It's funny how you have to say that, even though San Jose is a bigger and more populous and more economically important city than San Francisco by a massive stretch for a long time. Seeing a magazine there, and just a gaming magazine, and it mentioning, just as an aside, that in a year, it didn't say it was a slow year for consoles. I knew it was a slow year for consoles, and that the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis weren't commercially what they were a year or so previous. That in that slow year, the video game industry still made more money in absolute real terms than Hollywood box office. And I read that and I was like, what? Are you serious? Because like I sort of knew, even though I was far from Mr. Gamer at that point, there was no game console in the living room of the house at that point. As much as I loved the original Apple II Plus generation of games, something that was a big bonding thing for me and the Schaefers and Dave Brevik and Michio Okamura and Rick Cease when we were the first people at Blizzard North when it was Condor, is that we had all grown up on those kind of mid-'80s, often actually pirated versions of those Apple II Plus games in the mid-'80s, and had those as a reference. I knew that games were slow as a business relative to that. I kind of knew that there was no big like Super Mario or Sonic hit that everybody had to have at that point. It kind of really was like summer into autumn 93 was kind of the last like really slow time for the gaming industry. So reading that, I was like, this industry seems kind of like slow at like the bottom part of the cycle from what I can sense. You know, when I visited like my cousins, they didn't like have like the new console title that they had to have. And it really was that kind of slow period, and stayed that way for about a year or two. We kind of released Justice League into like the end of the Sega Genesis, and it still was quite slow. And Sega really was actually kind of in the middle of a bunch of missteps where they kind of lost their status at that time. Nintendo didn't really have this is a long time before the Wii. This is the GameCube era, I guess, shortly before the GameCube. It was generally 93 to 95 was kind of like the last slowish period, and I knew that was the case. So when I read that, I was like, that's actually a really, really interesting data point, in that we think that Hollywood is like the kind of king medium, but it's already in these absolute terms making less absolute money than video games, you know, from what was, I don't know if that was like, you know, quoting a 12-month period from like summer 92 to like summer 93 or something like that. But that really, really struck me. And it's good in that kind of like the opportunistic part of me saw that and recognized, okay, I should try to sneak into this industry. And that whatever kind of compelled me to think that way, that really was a smart thing to think and a good opportunistic thing to think at the right time, because very, very, very few musicians and composers really noticed that at that period. And so it really was not that competitive a thing. Like when I found Dave and the Schaefers, by using a Nintendo document that listed all of their publishing affiliates in the Bay Area, and me like literally driving around up around and figuring out that most of those developers / publishers were just front offices of Japanese developed games, and they were just kind of like the American distribution thing. But the two people I discovered were 2K Games in Nevada, which still exists in like their great grandchild form, and actually has had a pretty good hit with NBA 2K. I think that's the great grandchild of the team that I talked to up in Nevada. But they were a sports team back then, and they've survived as such. And so, sports titles don't really need original music, And even like when they do sort of like use original music, it's sort of like the Fatboy Slim thing in like the 20 years ago, which was perfect for like the FIFA menu. Wasn't really written for games. It was a licensed thing that was like, a club radio tune that was just a perfect licensing thing. So pretty much the only people that I found that were really like a good fit was Dave and the Schaefers, working on their sports titles and just kind of being a interesting collection of dudes that had like strong opinions and were obviously like very creative and fun and original. And my nose for their personalities ended up paying off in that, unbeknownst to everybody at that point, the game that was Dave Brevik's favorite way to relax was playing Angband at lightning speed and rampaging through these ASCII rooms in a way that just looked like a blur if you were looking over his shoulder in terms of like, what is this guy doing in this field of ASCII characters? And what he was doing was playing what became Diablo, still at like probably like 5 or 6 times the speed of what Diablo ended up being, even though our first attempt at doing that was as a step time game where we saw it as Angband and XCOM having a baby back when XCOM, which was a really popular game in the office, was a step time thing.
Really popular game.
Yeah, it was originally like
one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah, it was a fun one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was well developed at the time.
It's funny. I had actually legitimately forgotten about Angband until you just mentioned it, and the memories just all came flooding back. Wow, did I spend a lot of time in that game?
Yeah,
man.
Dave's character was called Diablo, and so that's the origin, and it was named after Mount Diablo, which was, I think he had a view from in his backyard where he was living in the that part of the sort of kind of East Bay where Mount Diablo is.
It's that time, everyone. The Magus Media Production sales pitch. Please check out our homepage at magusmediaproductions.net so you can stay up to date on all of our shows. Check out our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Magus Media Productions, both of which have our Discord link on it, where you can join us for live shows as we record them for future release. At Magus Media Prods on X, our Patreon, patreon.com/Magus Media, where a $5 donation will help us keep the lights on and bringing you new content, and you get some stickers. Thank you for your consideration and support.
Well, they want to build a new project, which is, in terms of political sidetracking, which is just kind of ridiculous and bizarre. They're planning to kind of this new, putting a new city not far from where Mount Diablo is, and it's just, I ended up in my personal life, I had an uncle that passed, and I wanted to drive down to see my folks with my kid anyway, so I actually, much of the summer was driving around that part of California between the Bay Area and Sacramento. In terms of life being a flat circle, that was one of my themes. And seeing the A's in their the stadium they think is temporary. Whether or not the A's are ever going to move to Vegas is a different story, though. They may think they're moving to Vegas, and I don't know if you guys probably don't want to make this a sports ball podcast, but I can talk baseball if you guys want to do that tangent. I didn't see them beat the Astros, though, which is cool. The A's still managed to be a much better team than they're supposed to be, and they are this year as well.
Awesome.
we actually we were very fortunate enough to have some time to cover the soundtrack to Hob actually just a couple of weeks ago. I think the episode just released, last week, Mike?
Yeah, I noticed it. I actually have to listen to that. That's on my list of things to check out.
And,
that was such a great art team.
Oh,
really great art team.
Yeah, phenomenal. I was telling Mike that I think that might be the first time that listening to a soundtrack inspired me to go and buy a game. Usually it's the other way around. You buy the game, you play it, fall in love with the music, itself, and there you go.
I didn't have creative control just by the way the mechanics of the team worked out, in that when you play the game itself, you might feel a little shortchanged from hearing my music relative to just putting on the hour-long YouTube thing that has the soundtrack. The game is not always super generous about actually playing the cues. But it's definitely like that art team was just so good. I wish that other aspects of the development were as 10 out of 10 as the art direction and art assets that we had in there. But as a composer, it was really a awesome opportunity and experience to have my music attached to that art team. But it kind of shows how hard game development is, in that Hob was not a hit because we didn't really succeed in QAing it and in kind of developing the full story and full plot, unfortunately. And we also just kind of, the whole kind of hyper-modularity of it was maybe a little bit too ahead of its time and kind of challenging to really implement. Mm-hmm. I feel like the game that probably is a year or so away from full release and being something you can really play on Steam, that's calling itself is it Moon Knight? Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That a lot of my old Diablo team buddies are working on, like Eric Schaefer, Anthony Rivero. I think Peter Who's on that team as well. A bunch of old Diablo IP teammates are working on that, and they're not going to call it Moon Knight when it's released. It's going to have a different title, but I think the technology is here now that in some ways what Hob was trying to be in terms of like super open-ended modularity, the technology is finally kind of here now, which happens a lot in games. A lot of times it's really hard to have the right shtick and the right technology and the right kind of marketplace at the right time. And definitely me and the Diablo team were very, very, very spoiled by that, and that we had the right idea at the right time. And the Windows 95 demo disc just from that platform, was perfectly situated for that.
Exploded.
And that definitely, like, that kind of serendipitous element very rarely happens with games. And we were super duper lucky with, to kind of be there at the right time with the original Diablo in that way. Hob, I feel like it kind of was a super awesome art team that struggled to have the other elements that kind of could have made it a hit game. They could have given it another year of engineering and QA that I think would have made it a hit game.
Well, I mean,
but it was great to be able to work on it.
Yeah, and frankly, the music, to this day, it's really kind of stuck with me. It's kind of become one of my you're very welcome. It's become one of my go-to like background music selections when I'm trying to really get the grind on, get some work done during the day. It's typically going to be like that, the Daft Punk soundtrack for Tron Legacy, a few others.
Oh yeah. That's a great soundtrack. That's a very good soundtrack.
Kudos to you for falling in lockstep with some other great pieces of music like that. And thanks. It was a lot of fun, and I think my whole shtick with it worked out fairly well. I talk about it in the little video that Wonder Russell was nice enough to do. That's definitely the most slick promotional video-ish thing that I'm in on the internet. And in terms of really trying to take the possibility of particularly fretless bass and pedal steel and kind of the gooey microtonal nature of them, and trying to kind of like use that to structure an original sound, that really worked out. And I'd like to think that it was original in a way that went with the originality of the
the product, on the whole.
Mm-hmm.
Well, speaking of the fretless bass itself, I felt like listening to that, and I described the soundtrack as like a living organism, but I pictured the bass as kind of the mind of the main character. Is that what you were going for?
It definitely worked out that way. That's my that was one of the last instruments that I bought in the Blizzard North era. I bought that in Redwood City in like 2004, 2005-ish, when we were internally working on something that we called Starblow, but never really got that far. But we had, of all the various random things that we had going on in the studio in that era, one of them was potentially a kind of science fiction-ish treatment a little over 20 years ago. And I bought that bass thinking that it would be good for kind of a science fiction-ish sound. And it ended up being that 10 years later. And it's also just it was a nice instrument for curing any potential bigotry that I might have had in terms of American rock guitars being, or just, Asian rock guitars or rock basses being any to any degree less than the American equivalent. That's a Korean bass, Lakeland, with the low B, and it definitely, like, I was really happy that when that project came together after returning to kind of fantasy world with Torchlight and Torchlight 2, that I was able to give it a real spotlight in a way that kind of fit the personality of the instrument itself, which definitely kind of, I felt like, had a story to tell. And did kind of tell that story in the game. So it was really serendipitous, and that, Trail of Space doesn't really fit the fantasy world straight up in terms of like when you're hanging out with like orcs and goblins and dragons. You don't really want to hear a big goofy, Jaco Pastorius kind of, warm rubbery sound. But it worked out great for Hob, and I was really, really happy to have that opportunity.
It does have an inquisitive nature to it that really brings it to life, and the music is so atmospheric. And that's one thing I wanted to comment on, is you have a real knack for breathing life into a video game that makes it feel alive, and especially with Hob.
It's great to hear. That's definitely something that I'm always really flattered when people put it that way. And it's definitely not something conscious. I just kind of exude it in a weird way. I don't really understand it, but it's a wonderful compliment. I love hearing it. It's always very flattering to hear that the idea that I have a natural ability to do atmospheric type feel. And that it's not just covering everything with tons and tons of delay. It's part of it, definitely. I definitely delay is your friend when you're creating atmosphere, but it's nice in that it's a wonderful compliment to get, and I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. So we have kind of a different question here, where towards the beginning of your career, you were helping create the identities of games like Diablo and StarCraft through music and sound design. I would
not give myself that much credit. I'm going to get credit on StarCraft, but really just 2 or 3 weeks of work on sound design. So As much as I might like to frame myself as like, oh yeah, I remember when the Zergs first came in and the Protoss first, that actually would be a total load of bullshit. In that StarCraft was 98% a Blizzard Irvine game that we had very, very little to do with, and I was very lucky that they gave me credit on it. So just to clarify that, it's nice. I like the fact that I have it. It's nice having like something that was 2% of the Korean GDP for a couple of years on my resume. But that would be it would be unfair for me to claim to have helped create StarCraft, and also a little unfair for me to have claimed to create the whole kind of RTS, evolution of Doom 2 that those guys did. Though I feel much more comfortable with claiming credit for how Wild Burning Crusade turned out in the year and a half that I did in Irvine, 8 years after that. right?
Jesse's got a little bit of a story.
So just to stop you there in terms of creating the StarCraft world, I cannot take credit for creating that vibe.
Well, boy, oh boy, could I I could gush about your work on the WoW Burning Crusade. So, funny story. I think I told Mike this before. The music in World of Warcraft, especially Burning Crusade, is especially impactful to me because I met my wife playing World of Warcraft in Stranglethorn Vale.
Nice.
Yeah, we met in Stranglethorn Vale, and I remember
That's
very
awesome.
distinctly, we were both playing together the day that the Dark Portal opened and Burning Crusade launched. And we made a point. I woke up about 2 hours before her that day, and I had to wait, and I wasn't allowed to walk through the Dark Portal and experience the Outlands before she woke up and caught up with me. So
experience actually cool. You know, we recycled. This is pretty well known now.
Yeah.
We recycled what was potentially Diablo 3 music that I'd recorded in Bratislava that January 2005 when Blizzard North was shut down. It seemed like a no-brainer to cannibalize some of those cues. So the big orchestral hit that you hear, which is a lot like and probably was structured on the Gustav Holst final big chord in Mars, which every action soundtrack composer that uses an orchestra leans heavily on Mars from the Planet Suite. That was cannibalized, a cannibalized Diablo 3 cue, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And Outland is all me. One thing I should say though with WoW BC is the starting Blood Elf zones and the starting zones for the other character type. Those were actually Russell Brower and Derek Duke, and were not me. I'm pretty much 90% of Outland, maybe even more like 95% of what you get in Outland. But I'm not the starting areas when you're still in Azeroth and making your Blood Elf and making your, was it an Undead Fiends character? It was some kind of darker, the two new character classes that were in WoW BC. Russell made the Blood Elf and Derek made the other one. I actually just saw Derek a month ago.
Oh yeah.
He's a solid dude in that. And even though with this career moment, I did not end up going back to Blizzard. I still felt like last month I had to go down there and pay my respects to Derek and check in with him and go have lunch and
absolutely
and give him a gift and keep the relations good with the Blizzard Kingdom, which I did, which was a real pleasure. I really like Derek, and I really like. There are even rumors that I'm the reason he's on the team, apart from his own incredible talent. I really like Ted Reedy, who is the Diablo composer now. He's a really good friend. I actually saw the Dodgers with him beat the Twins just about a month ago today.
Awesome.
Which was a really fun experience, and he did an amazing job of covering the whole 80 or 90 hour arc that was Diablo 4, and he did it because he really knows what he's doing. He really knows how to keep the kind of harmonic base of the different zones different and mix that up and mix the instrumental textures up and mix the thematic textures up to make like an 80 or 90 game arc feel like a real kind of fresh enough as you go from zone to zone, yet consistent enough, which is a really incredible, crazy thing to ask from the composer when you think about like Wagner's 4 ring operas were in total only like less than 20 hours. So like really like having an 80 or 90 hour game arc feel genuinely different yet kind of consistent is really, really hard. Very, very high skill. I mean, he did an awesome job of that, which I'd like to think is actually a function as well of my good taste in terms of me recommending him for the job with Derek,
Absolutely.
5-6 years ago.
Yeah, one thing that Jesse and I talk about pretty frequently is, how much time we might spend in an area or a level per se in a video game, and the music not getting annoying. And he definitely displayed a very, very good talent in making Diablo 4 seem very natural and very exciting throughout the whole thing. Just like even in Diablo 1 and 2, there's such diversity to it that you never find yourself getting bored, and you might be playing the same game over and over, but the music is very, very alive and just amazing to listen to keep those adventures going.
There's another old buddy of mine that worked with me previously on Diablo 2, like the last year that we worked on it, and that's he was a contractor at that point, and that's Joseph Loritz. So he was also a big part of the sound effects world being really excellent. Well, so in terms of like with me having this new gig with Latitude, that hopefully is a long-term gig, and that precluding me from returning to the Diablo universe anytime terribly soon. It's that goes with the fact that I've done too good a job of helping that team find like truly awesome talent, which Ted and Joseph definitely are. So I may have done too good a job of putting that IP in the right hands, at least for like the next chapter of what they're up to there.
So what was it like? One thing that I was kind of interested in with the WoW Burning Crusade piece, what was it like to walk in on essentially the second? I mean, obviously there's been Warcraft and Warcraft 2, Warcraft 3, that kind of thing, but to walk into like the second installment of a pretty well-established franchise and try to have to integrate your own musical talents with the existing base.
Crazy. It was really, I mean, it was crazy because for a lot of reasons. My wife literally went into labor when we got the surprise news that Blizzard North was being shut down. Mm-hmm. So I literally had I literally drove down to Orange County with a like 6-7 week old kid, as a new dad, and on top of that. The audio / music department at Blizzard in the previous year, there was a lot of kind of tension and burnout in the original development of WoW. Mm-hmm. And most of the people that were on that team, including another friend of mine, the very talented Jason Hayes, who wrote the iconic starting theme of WoW. It was so famous. He'd actually left the company about 6 or 7 months before we came down, right as WoW was releasing, which is kind of unfortunate in that they didn't. The people that left right before it released and didn't get to kind of enjoy the success of it necessarily as much as they should have. But what that meant was the WoW music team was basically me and Derek Duke and the music lead that came in that was hired at that time, who was Russell Brower. And so it was just the three of us, which was kind of half the size of the team that made the original WoW, including the super talented and probably number one musical creator of the original Blizzard sound and music approach, which is Glenn Stafford. So Glenn was gone at that point. Jason Hayes was gone at that point. Who were two kind of really important creators in terms of the music and sound world at Blizzard. So it was interesting in that I had the Diablo IP on ice. I had in the can a bunch of interesting Diablo 3 cues. I had a 6 or 7 week old kid, and a beautiful wife that I've been very lucky to have for the duration of this past 25 or so years. I had all those things, but the original team there was kind of MIA, for their own reasons in terms of like what motivated kind of like that departure that happened when it did. I'm sure, everybody there had very good reasons for the disaffection that drove them out of the company at that point. But it was pretty funny. I was actually in the position of being the person to go through all the musical cues that were in WoW at that point and kind of audit them and catalog them as we were making Burning Crusade, kind of somewhat early in the process, and like getting a grip on all the various walking queues and various discovery queues, which is great and very interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, that it was a lot of fun, but it was also a little bit overwhelming in that, having just this kind of surreal aspect of suddenly being a parent, suddenly being in a very different environment in terms of kind of, having the literal no windows of the audio offices in what ended up being the last year or two of that iteration of Blizzard offices before they moved to the Broadcom campus. I think Broadcom still was occupying what is now the Blizzard campus, and that was the last period before Blizzard took over that space around like 2006 and kind of moved to like, the more big time kind of custom cushy locations that was a little bit more kind of fancy than the offices. The offices weren't bad in that they were occupying near the UC Irvine campus. But yeah, I had kind of it was surreal to like go from an apartment in San Francisco, very incredible rent control deal. If we'd stayed in that apartment, we would have been paying like 25% of the rent as kind of the SF tech economy kept exploding. If we'd stayed there, though, it didn't really have room for a kid. But yeah, we were paying under $2,000 a month for like an apartment that probably on the market would have been like $6,000 a month, like just like 3 years later that we could have been rent control royalty. So to go from that to going from, we were lucky to score a really nice apartment in Laguna Beach. One of the very rare places in Laguna Beach proper that's not up on the hill overlooking, that's actually near the town of Laguna Beach, where we actually were 3 stories up. It actually had views of the Whitecaps from the little patio there, to like drive through the kind of Laguna Woods, kind of the nice, like kind of 1%-ish life of the area that I would drive through on the way there. But it was genuinely weird. It was also kind of like the glory time of George W. Bush and kind of the weird delusional state where everybody pretended that the real estate bubble of 2005 and 2006 like was real wealth, and that the second war in Iraq wasn't an incredibly bad idea. So it was genuinely kind of surreal to be down there, kind of in the ultimate like kind of Republican dreamland in Orange County, coming straight from a apartment in the middle of SF on DuBose Park. So that was all pretty strange to go from a very SF-ish, very Bay Area location, kind of iconic Bay Area location. DuBose Park is a really nice location. To go from where the Castro becomes the Lower Haight, to be in kind of the Laguna Beach dreamland in the peak of kind of the fake money of that housing bubble.
Mm-hmm.
Driving past where Warren Buffett had recently lived with his view of the water in Laguna Beach, and through the neighborhood that I think Mike Morheim was living in then. I don't know if he's still there. And then to go on the toll road on the 73 and had my routine of being able to take my car up to 105, briefly, because you could do that on that routine because you're getting on and off and on the toll road with my little transponder for the toll. It was very surreal. But it was fun. It was musically fun as well. I enjoyed the challenge of the different zones in Outland a lot. And I liked I liked a lot of people on the team. I liked Brian Farr, sound guy on that team, a lot. Derek was a good ally to have on that team. And, it was kind of the end of kind of like the innocent, nerdy phase. Maybe that phase ended when those people left in 2004. But it was kind of like the end of that kind of more innocent, nerdy, kind of Samwise glory days, Samwise and Metzen kind of glory days of Blizzard. And it was cool and fun to kind of be around that while it still existed, with Joey Ray Hall there as well in his office. Even though that was kind of a rival culture to us at Blizzard North, it was still kind of fun to be in the middle of it and experience it. And in a lot of ways, it was kind of like soon to disappear in a way, in that like like everything in this world, the best way to destroy something is either to like inflict extreme poverty or extreme wealth upon it, right? If you want to destroy a family or a person or a society or a nation, what you do is you radically and abruptly make them very, very poor or make them very, very rich. And Blizzard was becoming very, very rich at that point. And so a lot of that culture, I think, kind of collapsed under the pressure of that, as I think all societies, and, I think that's true with absolutely everything. It's nothing survives the trauma of going all the way to either end of kind of like that experience. Just in my experience in life.
Yeah. That situation there, I think Blizzard went through some turbulent times around that period. I think that just goes to show you can't get out of it unscathed. And I was finished reading that book, Play Nice, that you recommended, and that was really interesting.
Jason Schreier's he's a real mensch. I like him a lot, and he's a good writer as well.
Absolutely. So when you were composing for Diablo, and this is my first experience with you, obviously the theme to Tristram, one of gaming's most iconic songs, in my opinion, you gave it such three-dimensional sound. There were places that song goes that you don't expect. And can you walk me through just a little bit of the writing behind that? Did you have any notes from the creators of the game that were like, we're looking for this sound, or was it really just you yourself were given a free rein on that?
I think it was the fantasy town that I just kind of heard in my head, and it fit pretty well. The first dungeon that you hear in Diablo is actually supposed to be kind of a climactic dungeon, and we realized it was better as an opener. And I have great memories of that kind of clicking into place in the game itself. Even a little more than Tristram. I think the big secret weapon in Tristram for me that people may not necessarily pick up on isn't just that my background is genuinely like neither classical nor rock. It really is somewhere like kind of perfectly floating in between those two worlds. But I think this kind of special magical ingredient was having some Peruvian American friends that were into the music. It's kind of like a family traditional thing of Chabuca Granda. That's a pretty obscure reference for most Americans. She was a songwriter in the Peruvian tradition. That's sort of kind of a low-key Hank Williams of Peru, maybe. But that style of kind of like the waltzes, especially kind of like the flowing waltzes that are probably derived from, in terms of having like some kind of flow and groove to them, were very much like the Hank Williams of Peru, and that they're derived from like the tiny black community in Peru that helped kind of create that style, partially through osmosis, that kind of like became like an Afro-Peruvian thing that kind of became more of a folk style, which is exactly what Hank Williams is too, really, if you look at him in terms of Hank Sr., of course. No, not to disparage Hank Jr., but of course I mean Hank Sr. But I think like playing those tunes and being familiar with like songs like Flor de la Canela is kind of the secret ingredient that made Tristram what it was in terms of bringing that to the 12 string. And I definitely was aware of the glory era of 12 string and classic rock, which really goes with the glory era of the pedal steel, lap steel sound in classic rock, and that there was a period from like 1973 to like 1977 I guess when like pedal steel and 12 string were both very hip and you heard them, that was the era where Jimmy Page, of course, had the double neck Gibson, so he could, do the full Stairway to Heaven experience with the Chinese 12 string element. That was also the era when Joni Mitchell, with her crippled left hand, needing to have multiple tunings, would set up like 5 different 12 string Martins on stage. So she could have that sound, in her glory years when around when Jocko played bass with her. So I was very aware of, one of the albums I was listening to, and that one of my go to sleep albums was the Joni Mitchell classic Court and Spark. Great album. Okay. That, of course, it's not really a 12 string album per se, but it's definitely part of the syntax of that time. And of course, I loved like Led Zeppelin 2, Led Zeppelin 4, Houses of the Holy, that all have 12 stringy touches around the edges and are kind of an important part of that sound. So I was very kind of aware of kind of the hippie legacy of 12 string and that color, and also aware of how, like, even though I was never a huge Pink Floyd fan, and it's funny how there are a lot of Pink Floyd-y things about that sound. Another big influence, actually, that didn't really fit in that classic rock era, but was also a big influence in terms of the power of the 12 string as a cool, interesting texture, was a guy I share a birthday with, who's the Bauhaus guitarist, who also used 12 string in some interesting ways in kind of that goth rock stuff, which I was kind of aware of as kind of a peripheral thing in terms of growing up listening to KROQ in the glory era, back when they were like the only place in the U.S. that were treating bands like Love and Rockets and Depeche Mode as stars before they broke big, like back in 84, 85, 86. And so just in terms of my attitude towards music, and in terms of like how cool it is when you can actually make kind of a novelty-ish aspect into something cool, that aspect was definitely informed by having, that era when I kind of like realized how cool music could be and how it could be my identity to a degree. Having like K-Rock as the background sound of like age 13, 14, which I definitely did before my family moved from LA in my high school years. Oh, so long ago, 40 years ago.
Well, you can definitely hear the...
A little bit of Bauhaus and Chabuca Gran, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of Jimmy Page.
You can definitely hear the influences.
In our subconscious. I was listening to, that's still comfort food for me now, is listening to Physical Graffiti just this morning. In terms of just like the grandmaster of getting different textures and colors out of the guitar, of course, just because something is ultra famous and ultra well known and ultra beloved by the billions of working class people around the world doesn't mean it's a bad thing. And that's definitely true of the glory moments of Jimmy Page and his influence on me as a musician.
Absolutely. Now, the 12 string guitar, that is obviously a huge influence there. Did you have any idea you were writing a song that would be so beloved? I know that's kind of a hard question.
No, not really. I think just all those influences kind of gelled in the right way in terms of, just a little bit of kind of like the hippie mojo that goes with the instrument. And in terms of a lot of time that I was spending in Santa Cruz and between Santa Cruz and San Jose, which is of course where Jerry Garcia originally came from, is the Santa Cruz Mountains. In terms of like his kind of aesthetic, though I was never a deadhead at all. In terms of like, in terms of being a musical snob, I probably, if you talked to me 30 years ago, I'd probably insult the Grateful Dead rhythm section before I do anything else. But the fact remains is I definitely like the kind of hippie-ish kind of folk mojo that goes with the 12 string is definitely something that tied in with how much I loved hanging out in the redwoods in that time and having a girlfriend that was going to UC Santa Cruz in that first year after I graduated from college.
Nice. I mean, just that instrument by itself, it has such a sense of space when you're playing it. It has a lot of it keeps it very versatile. Like, I have 6-string guitars and 4-string basses, but when you expand upon those traditional instruments, I mean, it just opens the doors in terms of spatial sound.
Tickles the mind because you think it's a mandolin like half the time. And I definitely tried to get mandolin-ish textures out of it. I ended up using a little bit of real mandolin on Diablo 2 in kind of some key spots. But that is kind of the cool about the 12-string is you get it's an American style steel string guitar, but it's also kind of like wants to be a mandolin at the same time. And so you get a little bit of that magic.
Absolutely. So outside of gaming, you have been on a little bit of a break, it sounds like, in between gigs. Are you working on anything, or have you been working on anything that's not gaming related? Or do you do any recording of music on your own or anything like that?
I have another life as kind of like a lounge pianist, sort of, but I've done zero professional work along those lines. And I also played some of my Spanish style guitar as kind of a jazz accompanist for my cousin's wedding. So my other identity outside of gaming and gaming music is probably me sitting at the piano and going through the Great American Songbook. I love. I'm a big Sinatra fan. I love like the 500 or 600 core tunes that are the Great American Songbook. Very happy to listen to like a Sarah Vaughan record. I can talk to you about the genius of Lawrence Hart, Richard Rodgers' first lyricist. So in terms of my like non-game identity, and I passed along a love of Jobim, which I more know in my midlife, and a love of Elis Regina, which I more know from my midlife. Elis Regina, the Brazilian vocalist. I passed along that love to my younger kid in a big way, which is great.
Nice.
So I'd actually kind of say my non-game personality identity that ties me with music is probably the person that loves the Great American Songbook, and you could put like in a restaurant or hotel as like the lobby pianist, and I would sound like that's kind of what I was going to do. And you probably wouldn't guess that I was the Diablo guitarist. And piano actually is, in fact, my first instrument. Absolutely my first instrument. So the fact that the world knows me as a guitarist and that I have my guitar nails right now and enjoying playing guitar. I actually haven't had my guitar nails grown out. This last project I did, as much as I signed an NDA and I can't talk about it at all, I guess I can say that was zero of my guitarist persona.
Okay.
I really feel like music is, I really enjoy, and I enjoy the way this new gig might give me some opportunities to do multiple different genres. I'm really excited about that. I really enjoy trying to be as much of, what Gary Oldman is to acting and try to be as rangy as possible, despite probably having, no matter what genre I do, even like my jazz piano persona probably is recognizable in terms of like a few traits. I'm definitely proud of the fact that, the me that wrote strings only orchestral stuff in Bratislava 15 years ago, the me that loves playing, Sinatra-ish Great American Songbook treatments on the piano or Jobim on the piano, the me that loves playing like, a rock style solo for a boss fight, or the me that like is known for doing the finger picking kind of like Lindsey Buckingham meets Bauhaus meets Chibuca Grande. That is kind of my Grande. That is my Grande. Sorry, that is my Tristram persona. But those are all kind of the same dude. And that's one of the great joys in my life, and I'm very lucky that all of those personas are kind of natural for me.
Absolutely.
And I think that's my personality in general. In terms of when I've been on the internet and social media, and which is a horrible idea for me to do in any case, when I've done those shenanigans in my bizarre research moments doing that stuff, I love using like 20 different languages with Google Translate and pretending to be I love the way that as soon as Google Translate, as much as LLMs can be bad and dangerous, I kind of loved it when they first got it right 7 years or so ago, and they first started to get really good at faking language facility as a written thing. I found that really, really fun and hilarious. and that definitely goes with the part of my personality that likes wearing different musical outfits. And sees it as a natural thing.
Absolutely. Well, I don't want to take too much more of your time, but did you want to plug your new project at all?
Yeah, I'm just, I'm familiar enough with the project to be super excited about the gig and to really instantly be head Kool-Aid drinker and Kool-Aid salesman. Like when I came on board, I was very interested in getting like as close as I could to stuff resembling equity upside with the company, because I really think that Latitude and the Heroes platform that we're developing, which you can experience in AI Dungeon and in Age of Titans. That's kind of the most popular fantasy queue right now. If you play Age of Titans in AI Dungeon on the Heroes platform, you'll hear library music cues that are not me right now. But you can use your imagination and think about what I'm going to be doing with the various genre options on there. But it's a really, really exciting thing in that I feel like it's perfect timing and that crew has put a lot of hard work into and a lot of time too, like 5-6 years now into answering the challenge of how do I turn the new GPT experience or whatever AI engine that's similar and a rival to GPT into a gaming experience. And they put a lot of time into that and a lot of expertise and a lot of passion into that. And for me, it's really just feels like perfect timing, and that I'm arriving just when that medium and that platform is ready to kind of step into being a more full entertainment experience and a more kind of full, traditionally immersive experience. And so I'm just super pumped about that. And I knew that like I didn't just find the product entertaining, but that when my younger kid with the free tokens having the dev build was playing it until like 4 or 5 a.m. for his high school summer gaming binge moment, and that he was totally into it. That was the proof in the pudding that I knew for sure that it has a super exciting future.
That's awesome.
And it'll be really fun watching it evolve. I would just tell folks to, whether or not they want to play it in the next month or two, is to keep an eye on what we do with it over the next year or two. I think it'll be pretty exciting. I talked to people in the industry about how AI has implications where it could create a gaming experience that was just as revolutionary as the old Infocom games 40 years ago. And I feel like AI Dungeon and the products that we're up to feel a lot like Infocom games felt when they were young, but kind of with AI power fueling them. Mm-hmm. And that's just super duper exciting in terms of like really being on at the moment of creation of what is kind of a new medium. And I also really, really like, as I think I mentioned at the start of our talk, I really like the fact that we're putting the power of engaging with a GPT type kind of like artificial personality in an entertainment context and not in a context where it's your physician, boyfriend, girlfriend, politician, cult leader, all that stuff where we're realizing it's actually pretty dangerous. And it's actually really dangerous for like very intelligent people that are not used to like getting snuck up on by like a bad romance or a drug habit. It's actually sneaking up on people that are quite very successful and very intelligent and kind of like creeping in through some kind of unforeseen kind of backdoors in their personality and doing some real damage. And so I like the idea that we're presenting it as an entertainment product. And I think that's kind of the future and something that like, the same way that, the old story about the women in the factory painting on the radium kind of elements on the old clocks and wristwatches. And So everybody at the time was Marie Curie, like 110 years ago, thought radium was just this cool, fun, glow in the dark thing. And there's an element of that with AI right now, and that treating it as an entertainment product, I think, is actually much, much safer than treating it as something that you let into your head, automatically and engage with.
Yeah, that can definitely be dangerous. But I'm super looking forward to that for you, and we are, both of us, I'm sure, very excited to see where this goes for you. This night has been a blast, and I definitely appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Oh, totally my pleasure. And I'm happy that you guys are sort of announcing to the world the new gig, apart from me just putting it on LinkedIn a couple hours ago. So when you guys post this episode up, it'll be and also I really haven't really spoken to people that have followed my music at all in kind of a media-ish way in a long, long time. This last project was a good 4 or 5 years, and Torchlight 3 was, as much as our ambitions and our heart was in the right place, there was a lot of reasons that it was challenging to give it kind of the promotional energy that it could have had. And a lot of Torchlight 3, I think, was in general, by far the most challenged title that I've worked on in terms of the stars not aligning in a variety of ways. So it's nice to be able to announce a new thing that I am genuinely excited about, where it's not like I had to apologize for Torchlight 3 as we were releasing it, but there were definite ways where it achieved a fraction of what it could have been, which is not true of most of the games I've worked on. I hate having to say that even now to a degree. So it's nice being able to have a little more of a positive hype thing with my new adventure and talk about that.
Absolutely. And are you near your guitars currently?
I'm near my. Do you want to sign off with my Spanish guitar?
Please.
Absolutely.
Not my greatest moment as a guitarist.
Awesome. No, that was beautiful. Well, thank you again, Matt. We are both extremely happy to have had you on the show and that you took the time to talk to a couple of nobodies. But thank you again. And
you guys are obviously both super duper intelligent people, and I would never ever call you nobodies. And it's been fun engaging with you. It's been fun chatting with you in text too. I really enjoyed that the past couple months.
Absolutely, and I hope we stay in touch. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, you have a great night, man.
Yes.
Have a wonderful evening, and I hope people enjoy the show.
Yes.
Thanks.
All right.
Take care.
Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, please rate and subscribe. We very much appreciate it. Also visit our brand new website, magusmediaproductions.net, to get all information on every show. See you next time.